Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Zach Metkler.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and today I'm here for an extra special, super duper, excelente, whatever else you want to call it, bonus episode because due to the short week, the Steelers, we're going to recap a little bit of what just happened with the Los Angeles Rams victory on Sunday afternoon, as well as we're going to boomerang over to the Thursday night kind of pregame show stuff as well against the Cleveland Browns. So we got a little bit of everything here instead of just doing two shows. I feel we could kind of smash these things together, and who better than to join me than well, it's not really my brother from another mother. Maybe not my usual brother, like my older brother from another mother. Maybe it's my younger brother from another mother. Zach, the professor of football, as we call him, Metkler. Zachariah, how's it going? Oh, you might not like that, actually.
No, it's fine. He calls me that frequently, and he does go with the adage of the brother or younger brother from another mother. So it's the typical adage at this point in time.
Oh, I meant the Zachariah part.
No, that doesn't faze me either.
I didn't know if you may be prophetic in some ways. We're going to see, man. I mean, some of the things that, we talk about in the back rooms quite often, not everybody always gets to hear your voice, but we do quite often, hanging around Steel City Underground, as we say in the back rooms. And, Brian, he had to get a nappy in this time, so he can't make fun of you
anymore. We're now even at this point.
And it's kind of weird because I haven't been able to do a post game for a couple of weeks now. You've been standing in for me, so now you get to stand in for him, and we could still make the ageist old man jokes for him too. So
interrupt his afternoon, evening nap. That'd be a real shame.
Yeah. In all seriousness, though, he did need to get some sleep. So
more than enough sleep. It's more than earned at this point in time. So no harm, foul, Brian.
Yeah. He'll be laughing at all of this in due time, and then I will get my comeuppance, I'm sure, and when we reconvene together. But anyways, the Steelers, we were there, you and I, and we got to witness a lot of this firsthand, maybe see some things in the stadium that people can't see on TV. I also rewatched most of the game. I'm going to say I was distracted in points, so there were some things that were more distracting than others, such as Vance McDonald running the football, which I had to rewatch that to make sure I saw things as I thought I saw them. I'm like, hey, I wasn't drinking beer in the stadium. I know I had an adult beverage or two headed in, but, not so much that I thought I was like, seeing things, like rubbing my eyes, and it's like, whoa, what's going on there? Like, is that Troy Polamalu out there, or is that Minkah Fitzpatrick? I don't know. And, we built a bridge on some of that stuff before, and I still kind of want to pump my brakes on all of that, but man, it's exciting. We may as well go with you and I were doing this, the things we heard, like not only at training camp, these are the things I hear either at Heinz Field or just, I'll be wearing my Steelers stuff around. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I could be hours away from Pittsburgh and I have somebody approach me and they want to talk Steelers football, which I'm always obliged to do because I could do that forever, as you can. And there's a couple of storylines that were really annoying, aggravating, almost frustrating, borderline, I want to punch somebody in the face when I hear it. And I think the one because we both kind of tweeted the same thing. Do you think anyone still thinks that the first-round draft pick traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick was a wasted pick or a wasted trade or a bad trade?
Honestly, at this point, if you still have that mindset, I mean, I don't know what more this man can do to convince you otherwise that he is easily the most productive defensive back this team has had since Troy Polamalu was owning the black and gold. The touchdowns are producing themselves at this point in time. And people are trying to look at the interceptions are gimmick. If you want to say an interception's a gimmick, look at how many dropped interceptions we've seen from players like Sean Davis and Joe Hayden over the last couple seasons. I mean, it's enough to make anybody blush. So the fact that even though they're gimmick, they're not guaranteed. And he's doing something with them. He's flipping the field, and he's coming up in big moments, putting himself where the ball needs to be, which is showing tremendous instincts that were talked so highly of about him when he was coming out of Alabama last year. I don't know what more you want. The Steelers weren't going to select a quarterback with that first-round pick next year, and if they continue to play at the rate that they're going, that first-round pick wouldn't be in a position where they could afford to even take a quarterback in the first round anyway. None of the safeties right now, in my opinion, from my early draft evaluation, are going to produce right now the way that Minkah Fitzpatrick is producing. And that was easily going to be the biggest need next year, with Sean Davis entering free agency and not really producing to the level you want to pay him a lot of money. So that being said, you have a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick who's going to be on a very friendly deal over the next couple seasons, plus a fifth-year option, plus a realistic long-term deal as long as he keeps producing at the rate he's doing. And I don't see any reason that's going to stop. If you're still mad about them giving up a first-round pick, if anything, that gives you a free night to not have to stress about anything on draft night come April. I don't know what else to tell you. It's getting frustrating and annoying, the fact that we're still having this conversation after all these games of watching him just put up gaudy statistics and making these games switch on the dime because of what he's able to do on the field.
Well, you know what? There was another piece of this, too. It's like, first of all, people believe that a first-round quarterback is necessarily going to outperform getting one in a different round, or whether the Steelers actually have a need at that position, and whether or not the player that would be, I don't know, the second coming would be available at the position they would be drafting at, because you're looking at who all needs a quarterback. It looks like the Bengals might be in business for that now, too, as well as the Miami Dolphins. And, you know, we've talked about this, and I don't want to belabor it because we got a lot of things to cover, but Minkah is in his second year of a 4-year rookie deal that being a first-round pick can be fifth-year optioned. Here's a guy that you're picking up. This isn't like trading for Marcus Peters, or, you know, that had a rich contract already signed and you're absorbing all of that, or Jalen Ramsey, who wants that rich contract. This is a guy that's still, you know, on the cheap, so to speak. He will get paid when that time comes if he continues to play to this level and be, you know, knock on wood, and God bless him, healthy. You know, this is just one of those things where you're not like kind of renting a guy either, like somebody that, you know, Nick Vanette's like a rental. He's in a contract year this year, so he may not be back next year. Who knows? They may extend him if he likes where he is. He doesn't get other offers, things of that nature. You know what I mean? But with Minkah, this guy's locked in. You know, why wouldn't you use the pick? It's essentially you're getting next year's pick a year early. You get to open your Christmas gift now instead of waiting until the 25th of December, and it's paying off for the Steelers too. There's a whole slew of stats here. Hold on, I actually had it because we had it from Field Yates, although you may have seen it in multiple other places because somebody copied it and then didn't put Field Yates on it, which was kind of unprofessional and crappy. And they got his picture and name off of it. So Minkah Fitzpatrick in 7 games with the Steelers has 34 tackles, 5 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 2 defensive touchdowns scored, which is more than a lot of people, even on offense. And the Steelers are 5-2 in those games. You know, I know you had a few things with that too that you added to it. I don't know if you want to confuse everyone with the maths, because, you know, he came in week 3 with the 49ers game, and they didn't win that one, but the Steelers have been pretty much on a roll, 4 in a row. Should have been 5 or 6 in a row, I should say. So 5 of their last 6 with an overtime loss with the Ravens that we're still kind of licking our wounds over that, because it looks like the Steelers have played them the best of anybody maybe so far as defensive game planning. Believe it or not, the Steelers defense is for real. You got to wake up to that fact too. But just going back with the draft pick type of things, I don't know what else maybe, you know, if you're thinking the Steelers have a top 10 pick, what would they use that on? Would they used it on like maybe a pass rusher? Would they have used it, you know, you're thinking quarterback. Well, I'm not thinking quarterback, and we're going to get the quarterback in a second, of course, and then talk about a little bit about this Rams game and going forward. But what other positions really? You're going to go after a wide receiver, et cetera, et cetera. You made a very good point when we were just, you know, we were walking out of the stadium, you know, and we were still talking about this because I think we heard it while we were walking. And yeah. It was the safety position, even as a 5th-year option, franchise tag, things of those nature, contract-wise down the road, those dollar figures are nowhere in the same ballpark as your elite edge rushers or some of your other skill positions.
No, and that's the thing. You know, you're looking at some of these 5th-year option contracts. I mean, everyone was complaining about the amount of money that the Steelers were paying for Bud Dupree on his option. You look at the quarterback 5th-year option. The 5th-year option for them is now what you're seeing from quarterback contracts 5 years ago whenever Ben got his first $20 million a year deal, and that was the big deal. That's now the commonplace for 5th-year options with them. Safeties still are not as highly paid as you would think they would be for how valuable they can be to a defense because of how underappreciated they are. And obviously they could change between now and then. But realistically, that fifth-year option for Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to end up being a little bit more friendly than it would be for a premier edge rusher on a fifth-year option, a.k.a. what we're going to probably end up seeing from a guy like T.J. Watt here in 2 seasons, and compared to getting a fifth-year option on a quarterback down the road from what you're going to see from a guy like Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Sam Darnold if he ends up getting his option exercised. So you see the safety position, the way it's valued in the NFL. Having a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick is great, but for some reason we don't put a premium on the type of talent that he could be when it comes to draft stock. That's why you don't see safeties going first overall, second overall. Very seldom do you see a guy like Jamal Adams go top 5 or top 10 like he did. So realistically, I think that's going to play into the Steelers' favor. As you have a guy that's a proven commodity, he's going to be playing on what would end up being a discount on that fifth-year option. And hopefully if he works out, he's easy to work with for a contract. You get a contract extension done, which even alleviates that fifth-year option a little bit more from cap hit perspective, and you have a guy locked up for a long-term deal. He's still so young and will be still young when he gets this new contract offer in 3 years, 4 years. So I think it plays well to the Steelers' benefit to have a guy that knows it's a proven commodity and right now is playing himself into a very lucrative contract, hopefully with the Steelers down the road.
Yeah, and you know what else? I'm going to give you a second to dig up your stats because I know you got them somewhere with the second-year quarterbacks that are out there. So here's some of the names. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, you got Josh Allen, you got Josh Rosen, you got Lamar Jackson, then you got Mason Rudolph, and then there's plenty of backups that are out there. And, I was approached, and it wasn't the only person. There was multiple people who have been, banging the drum to play Duck Hodges over Mason Rudolph, which I don't quite understand from a perspective of what do you think you're getting that's going to be any different. I think the game planning will be just as safe to protect Duck Hodges in some cases, but I didn't feel that Mason Rudolph has been playing it safe. And in fact, when they got to the Ravens game, I felt like, he had a lot of confidence. He was pretty comfortable. And of course that got rattled by him getting knocked out and then not playing due to, the concussion and then a bye and then, a little bit of rust. And I think he's starting to settle in a little bit still. I get what some people are saying, maybe holding on to the ball a little bit, maybe a little hesitation here or there. Who doesn't have that? Does Ben not throw passes behind people sometimes or overthrow people or anything like that? Ben Roethlisberger, the old gunslinger, didn't have it anymore. Does anyone remember that? Or, hey, we're not getting all of these big plays downfield. The deep passing game is completely lacking with the Steelers. You got to fire Todd Haley. Then people are unhappy with Randy Fichtner. I don't think you're ever going to win these arguments regardless of who the quarterback is, but Mason Rudolph's the guy with the draft pedigree. It was the guy they had a first-round grade on. He's the guy that they have everything invested in so far 2 off seasons. He's a second-year guy now. He won the backup job, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the, crap on Duck Hodges. I like Duck Hodges, but I think you're expecting an awful lot from an undrafted quarterback, and we've seen it. I get it. Kurt Warner and guys like that really are an exception to the rule. Even guys taken in the third round are an exception to the rule for the most part, but as we see some of the guys in the first round that are taken in the first round, they aren't instant hits if they ever pan out in the NFL to begin with. And Brian and I have said all of this until, we've turned blue in the face as far as, just because you take a quarterback or any player in the first round for that matter, doesn't mean that they're going to be an instant classic. And we're even seeing where it's taken 5 years for Bud Dupree to really find his stride, and he's starting to terrorize some guys out there now. And I think people are starting to take a little bit of notice. It's also the other pieces that are around him, too, that you don't have to overcompensate for. And you're going to see the same thing with the quarterback position because timing's going to be different. Everybody's different. There's not going to be another Ben. There's not going to be another Brady. There's not going to be another Drew Brees. I mean, teams have to change. Even Bill Belichick had to change when it was like Garoppolo, or I'd say Garoppolo was probably a little closer to Brady than Jacoby Brissett was when they were playing him, and it's things you have to adjust for. And I think you have to remember that they went into the season thinking they would have Ben. The whole playbook was pretty much designed that way, and now they're making some adjustments for Mason Rudolph. But I think the whole entire argument is, okay, I get it. You could like Duck Hodges. He has a great nickname too. He has a great story. He's a guy that can develop. I'm glad he's on the roster. I'm actually comfortable. I feel good that he's the backup right now. and not Paxton Lynch, to be completely honest. And, I feel better than that than like throwing like a Matt Castle or name some guys that are after runs that are still around in the league, right? I guess Ryan Fitzpatrick is okay, but like a Josh McCown, or who else am I thinking about? Sanchez finally retired. I'm missing somebody else here that it's like, we were asking who was still the Rams backup quarterback. It was Blake Bortles. I'm like, would you rather have Blake Bortles than Mason Rudolph at this point? You know what I mean? It's like, careful what you wish for, folks, because you really don't have it as bad as you think.
Yeah, and so I've always looked at stats, and especially when it comes to quarterback play, they can sometimes be arbitrary due to the fact that there's so much more that paints the picture. But I still think it gives you a general idea of what they actually are doing on the field. And when you look at the second-year quarterbacks in the league, so you have the big first-rounders that were named: Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, who's no longer even a starter since he's been benched for Ryan Fitzpatrick. But when you look at Mason Rudolph, who was the next quarterback taken after these guys, you see a quarterback right now who's second in completion percentage at 64.5%. He's second in touchdowns, mind you. He's only played 7 games so far this season. He has the least amount of interceptions, 4. He has the second best touchdown interception ratio of those guys, behind only Lamar Jackson, who's 15-5. He has the second best passer rating at 93, and he's been sacked the least amount of time of any of those rookies, and the least amount of time of any quarterback in the NFL with at least 200 passing attempts this season. That's not by coincidence. I don't care how you put it. And when you look at the argument between, well, he's not throwing the ball downfield, and if they're not going to let him throw the ball downfield, then they should give Devlin Hodges an opportunity. When you look at Devlin Hodges' one game playing so far this season, where he actually got the start and played, he went 15 of 20 for 132 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. If you remember from that game, the 1 interception he had is when he did force the ball downfield, and it was picked off because it was not that great of a throw. When he looked at his adjusted yards per pass attempt on that game, it was only 5.35 yards per attempt in that game. So the argument that they were allowing Devlin Hodges to push the ball downfield isn't based in statistics, due to the fact that so far this season, Mason Rudolph's yards per average, or yards gained per pass attempt adjusted is 6.7. So it's over a full yard more per game. And when you look at yesterday's game, and fans are complaining about him not pushing the ball down the field, that was actually his second most productive game of pushing the ball down the field, behind only the Ravens, or the Bengals game in Week 4 and the Ravens game in Week 5. So he is pushing the ball downfield, but you can't just look at it because of the fact that you see a player running down the field wide open. I know there was a couple plays last week against the Colts that were broken down where you see a guy like Deontay Johnson who's free, but yet he still tries to check down. If you watch the play design, it's a screen play. We talked about this in the back channels. You have a guy like Mason Rudolph who doesn't have the experience to go forth and really see the field on a design screen, because he's so keyed in on just getting the ball to the route it's supposed to go to, which is going to be the running back, or it's going to be Vance McDonald on a quick tight end screen or bubble. And he just puts it in there, and if it's not there, it's not going to move. And you can tell that just due to the fact that you can see the offensive line release downfield. If it's just a standard pass play, those guys aren't releasing downfield. And Mason Rudolph hasn't had the exposure and the experience we've seen from Ben Roethlisberger to take a broken screenplay and air it up to a receiver downfield, especially when he's getting the pressure from the guys in his face. That's more of an issue from what fans are trying to put on Mason Rudolph that should be put on Randy Fichtner from holding it back, because we've seen Mason Rudolph be willing to air it out. I mean, the game against the Chargers, I believe it was. Not the Chargers, I'm sorry. I think it was either the Ravens game or the Dolphins game. He led the NFL in air yards per pass attempt that week with 13.3 yards per pass attempt, which was the most that week in the NFL, and is in the top 5 of any game by a quarterback this season in the NFL. So the notion in the narrative that he's not forcing the ball downfield, he's just dinking and dunking, I don't think is fully grounded in accuracy. But it is working for what they're trying to do. It's getting the ball out quickly. You don't see Juju beating a lot of one-on-one matchups consistently. James Washington's not beating all his one-on-one matchups consistently. And for a guy who's only making his 7th start, you can't expect him to have these type of seasoned veteran moves that we're seeing from him, like Ben Roethlisberger, who's been a quarterback in the league for as long as he's been. It's not saying that he'll ever be to that point, and I'm hoping he will continue to develop as the year goes along and start feeling that out more as time goes along. But we saw moments even yesterday in the game. You and I commented how many times where we were complimentary of Mason, for standing tall in the pocket, having his eyes downfield, sensing the pressure, stepping up and trying to make a throw downfield where the ball was either dropped by a receiver after it was wide open, or he made a nice completion, and then you saw the play with James Washington where he fumbles. So I'm not putting this all squarely on Mason Rudolph. There's a lot worse you can do at this point. But to say that the offense would be any different just because you're putting Duck Hodges in there because he's a gunslinger that we've seen probably very similar to a guy like Brett Favre who just guns it and goes from there. I'm not saying he's Brett Favre because he's not. But you're not going to get the same type of production. Your best chance at winning games right now, like it or not, without Ben Roethlisberger is going to be Mason Rudolph based on what they have on the roster, and that's not going to change. He is their guy. Duck Hodges isn't a bad backup at this point in the stage of the season, but I really don't think the narrative that he is as bad as he has been when it comes to dinking and dunking should be put squarely on his shoulders, because I think a lot of that is by design, and I put a lot of that blame right now on Randy Fiegner more than I do on Mason Rudolph.
Oh, I got a lot to say, buddy.
Yeah, I ran with that. I apologize.
Oh, no. So I think there's a lot of, Brian and I were getting into this about, Ben Roethlisberger passing an eyeball test. Well, how many eyeballs can you pass a test when I'll give you a little, you probably would know this off the top of your head. Ben's rookie year, okay? How many games? 13 games. How many times did he attempt more than 30 passes in a game?
I actually had that. I think it was twice.
Zero.
Zero?
Okay. Regular season. He had one game. He had a playoff game against the Jets where he actually attempted 30 right on the nose, but never more. And in fact, most of his pass attempts, you got games here, 16, 17, 18, 19, 2 with 20, 2 with 21, 22, 24, a pair with 25, and then 28. And all but one of those he started. So, there's something there. That's an 04. That's 04 Ben Roethlisberger, some vintage Ben Roethlisberger. Just to give you an idea of Ben, going through the years here, we got Mason Rudolph right now has 203 pass attempts through 7 games, 6 starts, 64.5 completion percentage, 1,330 yards, 11 touchdowns, 4 picks, right? Okay, so let's take Ben, the same exact thing through his first 7 games, of which he started 6. 155 attempts, 69.03 completion percentage, 13.16, almost right on. They're almost identical here. A little bit more completed, but a lot less attempts. 155 to Mason's. What did I say? Mason had 203, and you got 11 to 5 TD to interception ratio. You got 11 to 4 with Mason Rudolph. So I don't understand what the eyeball test here is, because, Ben had Heinz Ward, Plaxico Burress, Antoine Randall L., Jerome Bettis. I mean, hey now, it's a little unfair. Now, I'll give you another little quiz question here. I'm looking up Ben, his second year, 2005, okay, because he got thrust in there earlier. Remember, he was the third quarterback, and injuries got him into the starting role as a rookie, because we know Bill Cowher was just going to sit him just like they did Rudolph last year, what Mike Tomlin did. So Ben's, 2005, how many games more than 30 attempts, unless you already cheated and looked at this?
I'm going to take a shot in the dark here. 0.
No, not 0. He won. 41 attempts, and then another game with 30 on the nose. All under 30 attempts with the playoffs, including, the Super Bowl. He only attempted 21 passes in the Super Bowl. He was 9 of 21. Most people, forget he was terrible. He had 2 picks, no TDs, a 22.1 passer rating in the Super Bowl against Seattle. So, some of us have some very rosy revisionist history here. Now, Ben started becoming more of a gunslinger in his third season in 2006. And in fact, there was only, I think, 7 games here where he had less than 30 pass attempts, and a couple here that he already had 28. And for various reasons, he may have stepped out of that game and had somebody else come in, like maybe against the Cleveland Browns or something like that nature, which may have been common. You get the lead, and maybe Charlie Batch or somebody came in. So you had that. But give Mason some time, man. I mean, this is a storyline where, like you just said, we were saying it yesterday, the receivers were not helping him whatsoever. I get that some passes are going to be behind guys. I already said that. It's how is that any different from Ben? But Mason has shown some leadership and he's shown some poise. And if you have Deontay Johnson grab a ball, Vance McDonald drop the ball, Juju's been dropping passes out there, Jalen Samuels dropped a pass. These are guys that are usually pretty sure-handed, and it's not like these are bad passes that are coming their way, like some ducks and stuff. In fact, some of the passes that look kind of bad, we've seen guys, come away with it, like James Washington. In fact, we were very happy with that James Washington fade touchdown in the corner there because that looked like training camp. That was put it up there and go get it. That's what they were working on him all training camp, all offseason doing. We saw it multiple times, and now we actually saw it come to life, so to speak, on the field on a Sunday, on a game day, and maybe the needle's starting to point a little upward there. I know Juju's still trying to get some traction here or there. He had a very big play at one point. I get that the offense is very stagnant. I think there's some different reasons for that. I think one of them is Aaron Donald yesterday, for sure. Aaron Donald is a force. Dante Fowler, you got to give some credit to the Rams defense. They have some players too, And this was the team that was just in the Super Bowl. Now, the Steelers defense certainly rose to the occasion and made life miserable for Jared Goff. At this point, and you're watching that game, would you have felt more comfortable with Jared Goff or Mason Rudolph as your quarterback? Pretty much a rhetorical question. I get it. But Mason didn't turn the ball over. I think that's the biggest thing, except for, you're digging the hole, an insurmountable task, so to speak, when you snap the ball over the guy's head or you're giving him bad snaps, because Pouncey and DeCastro were seeing ghosts a little bit out there yesterday.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jared Goff, I've always viewed as a guy who's not going to be anything more than a high-end game manager. And this recent play by him doesn't really change my opinion on that. I saw a tweet on Twitter about his last 16 games. So looking at his last 16 games over the course of a season, he's 362 of 608, which is 63.1%. He's had 4,256 yards. His touchdown interception ratio is 17 and 16.
Oh, yeah.
He has a 79.2 passer rating. He's been sacked 28 times, with 219 sack yards lost, and he's fumbled the ball 16 times. Now, I understand that he was a very good piece of their puzzle last year on offense, and this offense that they currently have with all the injuries they've had on that offensive line is a shell of itself, with Todd Gurley still kind of nursing whatever fragile knees he has and trying to get some young running backs some time. But this offense isn't the same thing as it was before. But the difference now being is the fact that you have a quarterback like Jared Goff, whose contract's $134 million, and you look at the money you're paying him for the production you're currently receiving. And I don't really know how you can justify that when in comparison, you're looking at a guy like Mason Rudolph, whose contract is just shy of $4 million. So I think you look at the production, you look at the stat line yesterday, you look at the turnovers. In my mind, I'm struggling to really kind of justify what they're doing. And I think you look at it yesterday. I know there was a point in the game where we were kind of really confused whenever we saw Blake Bortles did enter the game. I thought it was because of the fact that it was Jared Goff getting hurt, but apparently it was by play design.
Yeah.
Him out there. You have a $110 million guaranteed quarterback, $134 million overall, and you're pulling him off the field on 4th and 1 to do some gimmick read option play with Blake Bortles, with the game kind of hanging in the balance at that point in time. I don't get it. And I think that kind of shows some justification about Jared Goff. And at this point, if you tell me I can have what Mason Rudolph is currently producing on the field for the price he is, with the expectations he currently has, compared to the expectations a $110 million guaranteed contract has, which is the most in NFL history, at that point, I think realistically, you're going to take the Mason Rudolph type, because at least the expectations are less because the money's not involved with him, and he's still producing what you're asking of him to produce. I don't think anybody is really asking for Mason Rudolph to go out there and be a vintage Ben Roethlisberger. I think Randy Fichtner's being pretty clear with that with his play calling. And I think fans need to realize that he's not Ben Roethlisberger. He probably will never be Ben Roethlisberger, because you're looking at a guy who likely will end up being a first ballot Hall of Famer, at worst second ballot Hall of Famer. And I don't see that being questionable. So in my mind, you can't expect Mason to be standing back there, just like you don't see Jared Goff sitting back there throwing dimes down the field. But honestly, when Mason Rudolph gets the opportunity to, we've seen him connect on some good plays. But to answer your question, I'm taking Mason Rudolph in that scenario. No shade on Jared Goff. But for the money that you're paying him, you're expecting him to be Pat Mahomes level. You're expecting him to be Drew Brees level. You're expecting him to at least even be prime Alex Smith. I don't see that right now from Jared Goff, and it's no slack on him. I didn't see it last year. I thought that offense last year with Todd Gurley and the weapons they had kind of made up for a lot of short gains, but I don't know. I'm not paid to make those decisions like the Rams front office is. That's on Les Snead. That's not on me, but to each their own, I suppose.
I think, you get a couple of guys who actually catch the ball in a few different spots several times. They move the chains on third down. I think we've had more of a problem with some of the more predictable play calling, I think we would call it. And it's, I understand they did some tweaks with the offensive line, the Steelers did. They moved Matt Filer in Ramon Foster's spot. They had Chuks Okorafor playing in at the right tackle. I know you were watching him like a hawk the whole night up against Dante Fowler for most of it, I believe. And there were just times, Mason Steele, how many times did he get sacked? Let me see. I didn't even I'm trying to find it now. Hold on. Let me see. You get a couple half sacks here, so 3 times, and that's probably the most success that anybody's had against the Steelers all season. I want to venture to guess.
It is the most. Yeah, they haven't been sacked more than twice in a game this season.
Yeah, and a half sack to Aaron Donald. I'm going to, and 1.5 to Clay Matthews. I'm going to consider that a victory. There's just some things where you take what's given to you. You know what I mean? And the Rams, this is how their drives looked. Their offense was not sharp. The Steelers' defense did their job. The Steelers' offense, maybe not so much, because we mentioned the first fumble, the snap over the head. Aside from that, these guys don't score, really. There was the field goal. There was also a missed field goal. So let me go through this. There was a punt, 5 plays and a punt, 5 plays and a punt, 3 plays for -8 yards and a punt, 5 plays and a punt, 4 plays and a punt, 3 plays for 8 yards and a fumble, 3 plays for no gain at all, punt, 6 for 38. That was at the end of the half where they actually kind of put something back together, and then they missed a very long attempt. I forgot what it was, but we were talking about it too. It would have been one of the longer ones in Heinz Field history. I think there's 2 guys. I know Dan Bailey was one with the Cowboys that hit a 56-yarder, and I'm trying to think who the other was. I think Boswell's long is like a 54, I believe, and I know he had just attempted a long one and missed into the same end. That same open end, even though it's not as open, is still tough to kick at, and we saw the ball does goofy things, even though there's very little wind. When you don't really see flags or anything whipping, the wind's still kind of swirling. There's just something like, it's like a Bermuda Triangle. I guess it's the best way to explain it, because if you've never stood there and actually looked up and seen it, I've seen it, and I'm just like, that's crazy. That's not possible. But anyways, that ends the half. Our guy, Jared Goff, goes out there and throws 2 interceptions on each of the next 2 drives. They get a field goal, so they finally get some points. Punt, turnover on downs with the crazy play that we were talking about, which, I don't know, man. When I saw that again and it was the RPO, I'm like, really? And it looked so disjointed too. It looked bad.
Oh yeah.
I mean that's the fire Randy chance if the Steelers pull off that same thing, which they did with the safety, by the way. That was just miserable. Those are the 2 plays that were the boneheaded plays for me, by the way. I already mentioned the Vance McDonald one. I think there was something personnel-wise. You have 4 wide receivers out there. It was a Ryan Switzer appearance, which you don't see too often anymore on the offensive side of the ball anyways. But you saw Deontay Johnson, you saw Juju, you saw James Washington, Switzer, and then Vance McDonald, and then they bring him into the backfield, and he carries the ball, and it's like he's not exactly the quickest guy to hit a hole or anything. I'm surprised that was like a positive play. Maybe they did catch the Rams by surprise for even that split second. So, and then of course the Rams had the play at the very end, because it wasn't over until the very end. We had to bite all of our nails off, pull all our hair out, and nearly have a heart attack. I asked the guy that sits next to me, his dad's with them too. I was like, he doesn't have like any health issues, does he? Because I just want to make sure he has a healthy heart, because I'm starting to feel it myself. But we saw they had all their timeouts still left, and it was like, hey, this is far from over. And the Steelers, maybe this is the difference of having Ben, but then again, Ben's been playing in the league for how long? You know what I mean? He's been reading defenses for so long. He's been playing at this full speed. This was Mason Rudolph's 6th start as an NFL quarterback. Cut some slack here. I still wish they could have moved the ball, got a first down, but no James Conner, no Benny Snell football. You're dealing with some guys that you called up from the practice squad, such as Trey Edmonds, such as Tony Brooks James, more of a scat back type guy. And then Jalen Samuels, who, he's kind of like a jack of all trades. I know some people they're sour on certain things with him. He's a utility gadget player. He's a third down back. He's that kind of guy. He's not, I don't know that he's necessarily 100% feature back, especially against a defense such as the Rams. And the way the Steelers offense has not really successfully run the football, period, all year long. So I don't get, there's some narratives there. And the same thing with, Switzer. If you haven't figured out that, he doesn't make I get that he doesn't get yards. Kick returns, who cares? I wish guys would just take a knee, take it at the 25. Stop bringing it out. Tomlin's been playing with this for a decade now. He brought in Jacoby Jones at one point. They drafted Dree Archer. The only guy that had any success was Juju Smith-Schuster, and I think that was against the 0-16 Cleveland Browns when he was a rookie, when he returned that in the final game of the year when these guys are already given up. You know what I mean? He's the only guy that maybe had success. I'm talking about kick returns. Antonio Brown maybe at the beginning of the decade or whatever, the last Super Bowl appearance. But aside from that, every single guy that's been back there, and you watch this with other teams too, it's not like everybody has success on kick returns. It's not like Switzer fumbles the ball on punt returns, Deontay Johnson. It's not like he dummies the ball too, or fair catch. He usually makes solid, good decisions. So in that sort of role, fine. I don't know why he's disappeared on offense. Maybe he's not running routes right. Maybe he's not getting open. Maybe they just don't need a fourth guy. Maybe that's why they let Eli Rogers go, because they didn't need two identical type players with that same role. Things of that nature. They even let Dante Moncrief go. You know what I mean? So it's just don't. I hate saying cut players, do this, do that. I mean, the only guy maybe in danger of losing a spot, depends on injuries, also depends on performance, was Robert Spillane getting called for at least 2 flags that I remember on special teams. Those are the type of things that shoot you in the foot. Negative plays, going backwards. Lucky that Mason Rudolph was throwing that pass when Clay Matthews batted it down and it wasn't a fumble, for example. Those type of things, they just got to protect the football. James Washington had that big play, lost the football. You can't be self-defeating, and it looked like there were times where they were starting to try and give the game away. We were discussing that more or less on the offensive side of the ball. I don't know, man. You're halfway through. I can't promise anybody it's going to get any better. The only way it might get better is you look at the competition that they have moving forward, and when you see what they did with these last 3 games, I get it, they're at home. I get that it was the Dolphins. I get it was Brian Hoyer with the Colts. There's the other guy. That's the guy I couldn't think of, was Hoyer. Would you rather have Hoyer? No. They got the 3 wins. Nobody thought that they were going to be at this point. You got the Mark Maddens of the world that are already saying, hey, the season's over. You can't convince us otherwise. These guys believe they could still do something. And here they are on the positive end, 5-4, positive end of 500 with their record. They're still in the mix, and they have 3 AFC North Division games all in a row now, starting with Thursday night up against Cleveland. So I'll let you finish off any thoughts you had with the Rams, because I'm sure we're still going to mix a little bit of that in as we begin to talk about the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I mean, my main thought is the fact that I still think the Rams are a good team. I think they're well coached. I think Sean McVay, I never thought, I had this argument last year, I never understood why at this point he was being claimed the top head coach in the league when he hadn't won anything. I still stand by that. I think you have to have some level of prolonged track success in the NFL before people start crowning you anything, whether it's positionally, whether it's coaching-wise. I think you have to have some level of, this guy is for real, before we start sitting there saying he's any level of anything. And I still think McVay has a long career ahead of him in the NFL. I think that's for sure. But I never bought into the whole, he's the best coach in the NFL. He's the next, he's one step below Bill Belichick talk that everyone wanted to hype up last season as they were making their Super Bowl run. That's no knock on Jared Goff. Jared Goff's proven to be a starter in the league. My main thing is I don't view him as a top 10 quarterback, and you're paying him number 1 money. I don't buy into that stuff. But I think realistically, when you look at the Steelers situation, to be in this point after they were 0-3, I still think you have to think back and kind of look and say, I didn't think they would be in this position. I thought I had hoped for it. I didn't think they'd be 5-4, ripping off 4 wins in a row. I mean, I'm one of the people that picked the Rams to win and pick them this week. I thought, I was skeptical about it, and I thought the Rams' defense would present a problem. But I just think you look at where the Steelers started and where they've come. I don't think it's any problem that this defense is helping to carry this team, because I think it's very reminiscent of when the Steelers went 15-1 in 2004, And that was the one thing that everyone says about Ben Roethlisberger's Super Bowls is that defense carried him to that point. I'm not saying Mason Rudolph is Ben Roethlisberger. I'm not saying he ever will be Ben Roethlisberger. But it was the same situation where he had elite defenses that were the difference maker, and he had a very sound run game that helped alleviate a lot of pressure off of him. You're looking at this offense right now. There is no Jerome Bettis. There is no Heinz Ward. As much as I like Juju, he's not Heinz Ward yet.
Yeah, at least yet.
Yeah. I mean, I still think Juju has very top-end potential in this league. I think he's flashed too much not to. I just think it's a down year for this entire offense, and you have to understand, like you brought this point up on the back channels, it's a completely different offense now with Mason Rudolph in there because the entire plan this season was around Ben Roethlisberger, around Juju, and around James Conner. And who were two of those guys have not been playing or effective this year. Kind of changes your entire game plan because no one really expected it to be the Mason Rudolph, Jalen Samuels show for most of the season like we've seen so far. So I think time will come, and as long as the defense keeps performing and keeps bailing out, I think the Steelers are getting to a point now where they can trust the defense to come up with big plays, shut down when they need to, and hopefully the offense does just enough to get to that point. I think when we see James Conner come back healthy and hopefully Rosie Nix comes back healthy, you can start seeing it, and Ramon Foster. I think those are three big pieces right there that we're seeing how much of an issue it is when the three of them are not on the field together. You're moving around offensive line, and that kind of ruins the chemistry a little bit. Ramon Foster's been an integral part of their run offense the last couple seasons, and Rosie Nix is still one of the best fullbacks in the league, which I know is, not as impressive because there's only a handful of them really left in the league, but he still does a very good job of what he does. And until we see them back on the field, you're going to hope that the defense can keep getting the job done, and hopefully the offense can have a couple of splash plays here and there that gets them some good scores. I do think by the time the season starts getting in that last leg, you're going to see a different offense. I think if everyone comes back healthy and Mason Rudolph continues to get more comfortable, because I think we've seen him get better every week. It wasn't over-the-top glorious yesterday, but I still think yesterday was his best game of the season against a very good defense. It wasn't like the Rams' defense is a bad unit. So I'm still with the adage of be patient, wait to see what happens, and go from there. They have a good opportunity against the Browns moving forward to kind of see what they can do with them, and I think it's a good chance to keep moving forward.
Well, of course, the Browns, they have Myles Garrett, but they don't have Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald made David DeCastro and Marquise Pouncey look like they had never played football before almost. You know what I mean?
All pro linemen getting walked back on ice skates is no small task.
Man, I'm telling you, that's just really something to watch. That was his homecoming for coming back to Pittsburgh since he played at Pitt. He hadn't played at Heinz Field since being drafted many years ago. And in fact, I heard he didn't go back with the team. He actually practiced with Pitt too today. So that's an interesting little tidbit there as well. I don't know who I can attribute that to, but I saw it somewhere, so it could be a lie. Who knows? But anyway, yeah, and you got the Rams now have the same record as the Steelers too. I think that's kind of interesting. One more thing to close the book on this. Rams 1 of 14 on third down and 0 for 2 on fourth down, including the fake punt that you were waiting for it the whole time. Yep. And you have Trey Edmonds, not Terrell, Trey, with an interception. So now it becomes even more confusing for the folks at NFL.com who screwed that up the week before too and got them confused. There's a lot of those Edmonds brothers running around, and they're all somewhat successful too. They're ballers. So, speaking of baller, I wanted to bring one more name up. Besides, we all know Minkah Fitzpatrick already. We've already, praised him to the heavens. I already have his jersey too. So, but what about TJ Watt, man? He just brings it every single play, man. And we saw right before Minkah, you probably couldn't see this on TV, but right before Minkah had the interception, the play before was it was a Mike Hilton pass interference call. They're trying to say he grabbed the back of the jersey. He had his hand on his back. You were screaming it was such a bad call. It was just playing defense. He extended, he knocked the ball away, and then they get a fresh set of downs. But on that very same play, Goff makes that throw because TJ Watt is in a reverse chin lock or whatever kind of pro wrestling hold you want to say he's in. And he's got an arm wrapped all the way around his neck from behind and basically rode to the ground, drilled into the ground. That was the one that was called just earlier. There was the series earlier where they had the holding penalty, and right in the middle of the field. And this one went like everybody just kind of swallowed their whistle and didn't call it. I understand things are going to happen, but geez, that was just like, here we go again. You know what I mean? And then Goff makes that pass, and they were all over Goff from the very beginning of that because TJ nearly came away with the strip sack immediately. And then it ends because Joe Hayden doesn't catch the ball, which we were talking about, but it springs up and Minkah is just there. The guy's awareness is incredible. He is just everywhere. He's there. And we're getting spoiled. We are getting spoiled already with all of this because the Steelers are looking great. They're looking like the Steelers defense of old. They're starting to shut people down. They're creating turnovers. They're getting to the quarterback. They're harassing quarterbacks. Gurley still had like 6.1 rushing somehow, even though it didn't feel like it. I think it was like one of the first drives. He had a couple decent runs, and then he started to get bottled up a little more. And then, everything else, it's like, hey, you got guys in the secondary that are ball hawks now. I mean, it's really, that part's really coming together, and it can't get any worse unless they just have a complete, total collapse somehow. You look ahead, I get that the Cleveland Browns just beat the Bills. I don't really know what I still think of the Buffalo Bills this season. I don't think that's something that, we'll be talking about that when they play the Bills. I think everything from here on out, and this is including the game, I know it's in Baltimore to end the season, but this is including the Ravens. Every one of these games is winnable now. We were looking at the schedule originally, well, hey, the Colts are a talented team, the Rams are a talented team. That's behind them. They're on a winning streak. Now they got to go up to Cleveland. Usually doesn't bode well, Thursday night games, that is, for the visiting team on the short week. But this is a bus trip, okay? They're 2 hours away. They don't have to go, across country or anything like that to play this game. And a familiarity of opponents, they haven't played them yet this year, but you still have somewhat of familiarity with some of the guys that you go up against. Browns, they had a couple guys that were out. A big one was Olivier Vernon on the last game. They've been shuffling a lot with their offensive line, which looked disastrous yesterday while we were watching that game, tailgating. And I don't know what to think here because, we were already making the comparisons. Browns fans have come to me, or I've seen in comments, the freaking Steelers are 5-4 with Mason Rudolph, and we've got Baker Mayfield, or we need to fire Freddie Kitchens, or Freddie Bathrooms, as we heard, too, as one of his nicknames. And it's just, it's one of those things where this is a game that's interesting because the Steelers have been pretty much underdogs. We're talking about the spread, and this isn't one of our usual FanDuel Sportsbook sponsored shows, but we at least got to put up what they have so far on the site. The Steelers are currently underdogs. They're getting 2.5 to go on the road and face the Browns, and these games have been close. The thing with the bookies, man, they always get it like almost right there. I was freaking out about it because the last one was 3.5 with the Rams, and I'm like, well, the Rams end up coming away with like a 1-point victory or something like that. The Steelers are going to cover the spread, and people are still going to lose their money. It was just the storyline was headed in that direction. I didn't like it. But the Steelers have been largely successful against the Cleveland Browns franchise for a very long number of years. Going back, the Steelers have won the last 7 of the past 8. They lead the all-time series 73-58 with the one tie that happened at the beginning of the year last year. They won the last game on my birthday, believe it or not. That was the 33-18. The last game that was on site was that 21-all tie. This is going to be pretty interesting to look at because, you're talking about a quarterback who's thrown 12 interceptions already, but then you're looking at maybe a revamped run game with Nick Chubb and the returning Kareem Hunt where they're using both of them in the backfield.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting twist. You saw the stats online about how they kind of are trying to utilize them both at the field at the same time. It was, 21 snaps or whatever, 28 snaps. I still think Kareem Hunt's role is going to be as the passing back, and I think that's kind of going to bode well for them, kind of due to how porous the Browns' offensive line has been. There was the one play on the safety against the Bills on this weekend where you kind of see Baker just standing there getting murdered in the back of the end zone while he has 3 offensive linemen just standing there looking at him. I know as an offensive line coach, that's what makes me the most furious when I see my quarterback getting crushed and there's offensive linemen just standing there watching him. I don't think the Bills' front seven has the same veracity that the Steelers can bring on every single play, which I think is going to be a very nightmarish situation for Baker Mayfield passing the ball, which might force him to kind of check down, there's that word again, to Kareem Hunt whenever he has the opportunity to, and he's in on passing downs. And I actually think that he could have a very effective day through the air in terms of what they bring on offense. I think Nick Chubb is going to be relied upon heavily with that as well. But I mean, when I see this offensive line that the Browns have and just how they try to utilize things on offense and with the inconsistencies of their ability to hold on to the ball, I mean, they're -8 in turnover ratio right now in this season, which is not good in case you're keeping track at home. And I think that's kind of a good how opportunistic the Steelers have been. I think that's going to be the difference maker, is getting after them, making that offensive line struggle, choke holding on whatever opportunities they give Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and try to get the ball away from them as much as they can. Because we've seen the Browns look good this year. I mean, their game against the Ravens early this season, when they won 40-27, that was a Browns offense and defense that was just on. It felt like they were going to be able to beat anybody they wanted to. Then we see that 4-game losing streak where they look like they shouldn't be on there. Freddie Kitchens, Freddie Bathrooms shouldn't be on a sideline calling plays. I don't really know where to go with this game, just due to the fact that I like the Steelers, but at the same time, I kind of get skeptical because this feels like a game where they're going to have motivation because the Browns are a desperate team right now, clinging on to whatever minuscule playoff hope they still have at where they currently stand. And I think that's going to be a potential desperation situation where if the Steelers let up a little bit or can't get anything going on offense, you're going to see a low-scoring game. I know the last time the Steelers lost to the Browns on Thursday night was in 2009, and they lost 13-3 or 13-6. I can see it being a very similar stat line if the Steelers' offense can't get something going. But, we'll have to wait and see how that goes.
Yeah, surprisingly, like the Browns, as far as just yardage, pass-wise, defensive yards per game, they're like 7th. But I don't think teams I don't think have been attacking them via the pass, which was kind of odd because they were, for a period of time there, they were missing Greedy Williams, who I don't think is really lived up to his billing so far this season as a rookie. There's Denzel Ward, who was banged up. And then, of course, you remember some of the safeties like Morgan Burnett, who, I don't know, he was out there, I guess, yesterday. But, it's Morgan Burnett. So they were missing like 3 of their 4 pieces in a lot of spots there, as well as, Demarius Randall has been banged up too. And he was under injury report, I believe, last week. Yeah, he had a hamstring. He was limited, and he ended up practicing. So you're on a short turnaround here. They had a whole bunch of guys. Really, the only 2 who actually missed the game, though, were Ricky Seals-Jones, a tight end, who's been filling in for David Njoku, who went to IR earlier in the year, and then Olivier Vernon. Obviously he's the bookend to Myles Garrett. It's kind of the Bud Dupree to the TJ Watt. So he's a very big part of their plans and somebody that you have to watch out for, too. The Steelers' offense, I still thought against the Rams that the middle of the field might be open. I'm not sure what they do here differently, other than, they didn't practice here on Monday, but they had to file an official practice report. And Mike Tomlin said in his press conference that if, we did have practice, James Conner would be a full participant. So I guess that bodes well. That's a very promising thing, obviously, for the Steelers to have. I don't know. When you look, you look at some of the storylines otherwise going into this game, the one thing we did say, we were talking about the spread, right? The Steelers are 6-3 against the spread so far this year, and the Browns are 2-6-1. Take that as you will. It looks like the bookies don't always get it right. The Browns' offense is 26th overall in points scored per game. They're 21st in defense, whereas the Steelers are 19th and 10th. So the Steelers' defense obviously getting it done, usually limiting points allowed per game. And in fact, if the offense would stop giving away touchdowns, it would look even better on paper. You know what I mean? You get, but you got the Steelers offense 27th both in pass and run yards. They did get the time of possession edge against the Rams, believe it or not, almost like 3 minutes or so. That's how they win the game, and you kind of keep the defense a little fresh. But I think they got to do a little more. We're going to see if they have a little more success with the Cleveland Browns or not. I think the inside linebackers are their biggest weakness there. Obviously, their front 4 a little more, intimidating. We'll see what happens necessarily with the corners. We'll see if they're able to pick on anyone. I'm trying to, I couldn't remember. Who's the nickel corner there? Why is his name escaping me now up in Cleveland? I'll catch it here in a second because I got the whole thing sitting in front of me. But anyways, it's kind of the way I feel. It's like this isn't the game you necessarily trust. If this were on a full week, you didn't have like this half-week deal. They had a fresh Rams team that came off a bye that they just went to war with. Now you get to go on the road. Mason hasn't been on the road in a month. Longer than a month because he didn't even play when they played in LA against the Chargers. So the last time that he played on the road, you got to go all the way back to the San Francisco 49ers game. And that was on September 22nd. So he's been playing at home. He played against the Bengals at home, played against the Ravens at home, did not play against the Chargers. You had a bye week, and then you had another 3 games at home. And this goes for the whole team, too, because now you're finishing off these last 7 games. You only have 2 of them at home. You got to go to Cleveland. You got to go to Cincinnati. You host Cleveland again. You got to go to Arizona. You host Buffalo. Then you got New York and Baltimore, both on the road. And now we're going to really see because remember one of those old storylines. I almost called you Brian, Zach, but you know the old story. That's because I said old. The old storyline is the Steelers aren't good at Mike Tomlin teams can't win on the road. And then they play down to inferior opponents. So we're going to see, you know what I mean? I think they got a chip on their shoulder, and I think they feel good where they're at right now. I don't think that they're confident necessarily. Defense might feel confident. I think the offense, they're going to be out to prove something.
Yeah, I think this is a team that knows what's at stake. I mean, at this point with where they've come, since they were 0-3, pretty much or even 1-4, it's essentially been win now. Every game is the playoff mode. So they kind of have to have that mentality that they shouldn't be comfortable. They know one loss here or there could be the ultimate deterrent that puts their season out of reach when they know that they're in a very good position right now to keep stringing wins together, which is not easy. I mean, winning 4 games in a row is not an easy task, and then stringing that along further is even more difficult, but they're in a good position, I think, right now. I think having James Conner come back will be beneficial, though. I mean, in the last season, he feasted on the ground against the Browns, and I don't think the Browns' defense, even with all the acquired talent they've had, is much better. I think you have an opportunity right now. He had 135 yards in week 1 last year, and he had 146 yards on the ground in week 7 when they played the second time. I don't know if he'll have that same type of efficiency just due to the fact that we've seen them kind of struggle to get any type of ground game going. But, I mean, James Conner is the best back in this backfield, in my opinion. Not that, Jalen Samuels isn't effective. I just think Jalen Samuels' best role is as a spot starter and a complementary scat back type kind of do-it-all utility player. I think that could be the really good thing that starts opening up the amount of production we see from James Conner. I mean, you look at the one game where he was able to actually get some traction going on the ground against the Dolphins. He had 145 yards rushing. You saw a game in that case where Mason Rudolph was also doing pretty decently on the air. I mean, that was his most productive game passing. He threw for 251 yards and 2 touchdowns and interception. I know it's the Dolphins, but when that ground game starts going and you can pick up chunk yards on the ground, that makes your life a lot easier because you're allowed to actually open up your playbook a little bit more and pass more freely, and they have to respect the ground game. They have to respect the passing game. I think that could be the difference maker against the Browns on the road on Thursday and on a short week is if you can get that ground game established, which is why I'm hoping we see something give from James Conner because I think he is going to be a difference maker in how this game goes because I still have concerns, even though I'm confident in Mason Rudolph's ability to continue developing. This offense still leaves a lot to be desired. And I think a lot of that has to do with the play calling. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you look at what is currently there compared to what was there at this point last year. It's a completely different picture. But I'm hoping that kind of starts playing into them trying to string some wins together. I still think they need to find an identity. I know that was a conversation I had with Brian on a previous podcast. I've had that conversation in my day-to-day life. They need to find an identity, whether they're going to try to be a vertical offense, a dick and dunk, or run first, however you want to look at it. Once you get that identity and you start kind of feeling what your core root is, and maybe they have that identity and they're just not demonstrating the greatest. But as a fan, I haven't seen it enough to really feel confident on a week-to-week basis. I can trust this offense to not stall out, to be consistently getting third downs, to convert when you get into the red zone, to not shoot yourself in the foot, which we've seen them so frequently do. And if they can manage to do that, I think these upcoming games are a very good opportunity to kind of start getting some of that traction together, to see what you can get going, to see if you can actually start getting that confidence. So you're not just a team that's doing well because of your defense, but you're a team that can actually start winning games, very well-rounded games as you start pushing towards the playoffs. which I think this is a very good opportunity against a up and down Browns team to kind of see what you can do. I mean, these games are always tough. They're always hard-nosed, hard-fought games. I mean, the Steelers and Browns are a rivalry, whether the record all time dictates otherwise. I still think this is a good opportunity to kind of get there on a short week and prove to the league that this is a team that's willing to go and make a statement moving forward.
Yeah, I agree too. I just wanted to say, I think somebody will probably be all over us if we don't mention like Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and like all the weapons. That's what the Rams just had. You know what I mean? They had Cooper Kupp out there. They had Robert Woods. I get they didn't have Brandon Cooks, but seriously, it's not too much different. Good, Todd Gurley, good running back. Yep. Except the Rams, even with their injuries, I'd still say better offensive line than what the Browns have. Oh, yeah. And you're going to see a lot of the same attack, mind you, if the team isn't winded. But the Browns are still a team. I know they got to play at home against Buffalo, but they still had to play a pretty tough game too. So you're going to have two teams that are banged up. There could be some sloppy football there. What did I say, 2.5? Was it 2.5 for the line? I mean, I expect another close game. This may come down to some of the specialists. You know, Cleveland has a new kicker and a punter. They got the Scottish Hammer or whatever his name is. So, and by the way, it was TJ Carey was the nickel corner I was trying to think of. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? If they could finally move Juju into like a slot or get Vance McDonald working out of the slot, they could abuse them all day because I don't trust that Morgan Burnett's going to be covering very well. Demarius Randall's all right. I don't have any problems with him. I think Denzel Ward is more than respectable, but either of the two other corners with Carey or Greedy Williams, they could take advantage of this matchup here. We'll see what they do with Myles Garrett. I mean, Villanueva handled him pretty well last year. He has 10 sacks. He's a disruptor. There's no denying it.
He's their best defensive player. I mean, I think without question.
Oh yeah, by head and shoulders, above everybody else, definitely. So this is going to be. It may be another one of these games where both offenses are kind of lackluster, and you may have a low scoring one. I think it was 40.5 was the over under. So you know what I mean. Look at the same thing, and we know Thursday Night Football isn't the sharpest thing to watch. So don't be surprised. That's kind of why I think we're being very cautious in our predictions here, even though I still think the Browns suck. You had mentioned that I was taking a lot of heat for it at the beginning of the year, and they're sitting here at 3-6. This is where now we get the bragging rights. The next couple weeks here, do we get the bragging rights? Do we get to say, hey, the Steelers swept the Browns? Because that's what they're going to have to do in order to make the postseason.
I mean, the Browns have any expectations of salvaging this season at 3-6 and making a push for the playoffs. They need to win. In my opinion, both the games against the Steelers, if they lose both of them and they drop even further behind, especially when the Steelers have that game with the Bengals wedged in between, the Steelers could effectively win 3 in a row or even go 2-1, and that's going to be such a deterrent to what the Browns are trying to get accomplished with their season. You can't fall to 7 losses and 8 losses and expect at this point to really be a strong consideration for the playoffs without needing a lot of help from other teams around the league, which you see happen every year. But the Browns are in even more of a win-now position, in my opinion, than the Steelers are. And I think they're going to play with that ferocity. And like I said, we've seen these rivalry games between these two teams get chippy. We've seen some physicality, and I think that's going to play into the Browns' advantage. And I don't think this is the gimmick game that has been accustomed with some of the Browns games in the past. I think this is still a very tough, albeit entertainingly dramatic Browns team. That has shown the penchant for producing on offense and has shown the ability to kind of look lost out there with the game plan and the execution and the porous offensive line play. I wouldn't be surprised if this game went in either team's favor. I do agree. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a close-fought game that's going to come down to the wire. And I think that's going to kind of be the brand of Steelers football you're going to expect to see moving forward with most of these games, just because until the offense starts clicking, I think the defense is going to have to be carrying a lot of this weight. And I'm fine with that because we've seen their ability to kind of do that at this point. Hopefully they can keep that trend up. As much as I'd love to see a runaway game and the Steelers just pummel whatever team they're playing, I just know at this point that's not realistic. So, we'll see what happens with it. But I expect a closely contested game, physical, depending on the conditions up in Cleveland on Thursday, so we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, conditions always. I didn't look at the weather report to see if there was anything crazy going on. I'm going to do that real quick before we jump on out of here too. But just talking about records, I mean, it's pretty much if Cleveland loses any of these games coming up, they'll have 7 losses. They're pretty much out of the picture unless some other teams start to implode. Buffalo being 6-3. That victory there really helped the Steelers too, sitting at 5-4. You got the Colts still at 5-4, the Titans at 5-5, and the Raiders are sitting at 5-4. Whereas the Chargers are 4-6 too. They're another team that's in danger there. Those are the teams that are in the mix outside of your division leaders, like the Patriots, Ravens, Texans, and the Chiefs in the AFC race. So I'm going to do. I hate weather forecasts. It almost started raining, and there was no rain in the forecast yesterday.
That was a little messed up, in my opinion.
Man, I'm telling you, that was not cool, man. It's definitely not cool. So you're looking at Thursday right now. It's mostly cloudy, 38 and 29, low at 29. That's not going to be much different, just a little bit chillier than what it already was in Pittsburgh. So shouldn't really, there's always some precipitation or something in the forecast, but there's nothing really here, 20% or whatever. As long as it stays just that crisp, cool night air, not really an advantage either way. Just as long as it's not the monsoon they had with the tie in week 1 last season. Yeah. So that just poured and poured and poured. And that was another thing that really set everything back too, because everybody's like, oh, look what they did. This team was 0-16 and everything like that. And it's like, yeah, but look at the conditions. Anybody could win in the slop like that. You know what I mean? That's when just anything can happen. But Zach, we're up against it, my friend. Thanks for joining me once again today, and looking forward to doing this again. We'll see if Brian awakens from his beauty rest.
I hope he does. I mean, at some point he needs to, so.
Well, I don't know. He needs a lot of beauty rest. Come
on now. Lyman have their moments. Don't do us like that.
Hey, I'm going to do it how I do. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, my name's Joe. His name's Zach. We encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.